Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Midgards Messer Mini Beowulf, which is a small, super duper chunky tank of a folding knife. Let me say this right off the bat. Obviously a smaller, thinner, more compact knife is generally speaking a better choice for the vast majority of people when it comes to EDC. This knife is, almost comedically thick, and I think that's done intentionally because some people just enjoy knives when they are super duper thick like this, right? Most people know that, they're not gaining a specific utilitarian advantage when they carry a knife like this. Is it super durable? Is it overbuilt? Absolutely. But I think a lot of those elements are overkill. But then again, it's like I said, I think most people know that. I think the people that are interested in stuff like this are just specifically interested in it because it's kind of a crazy object, right? The Midgards Messer knives have had the same kind of theme. They're big and they kind of take on that TV Viking weapon aesthetic. You can see that across a lot of their models like the Viking, one of their models is literally called the Viking, and some other stuff, right? This is really, really cool. I believe this was actually sent to me before they were released. I believe they plan to release this for about 350 euros. So it changes about 6 to 7%. If you're going to change it to US dollars. But you should eventually be able to find this knife on the Tools for Gents website, which I will link right down below so you guys can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel use my links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Tools for Gents and Midgards Messer for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. It is absolutely smaller than its older brother, but it's not a small knife, and I'll show that off here in a second. Overall length is only 6.5 inches. If you really want me to measure out to the glass breaker, you could call it like 6.65, 6.7. Blade length is actually under 3 inches, 2.75, and your cutting edge is, no, that can't be right. The cutting edge is the exact same length, yeah, 2.75 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. So you can see here it's actually shorter than both, but still substantially larger. We'll show dimensions here in a sec. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Definitely closer to the size of the Para 3, but obviously completely and totally different. And then last but not least, actually no, not last. We'll do 80 20.5. There you go. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bugout. Alrighty. And then I think most importantly, let's put it up against the large one, because I actually own the large one. I actually own the very first one ever made. Where does it say? Yeah, number 1 of 250. So there's the gigantic one, and here's the little one, right? So this is definitely smaller. It's a little bit thinner, but not, humorously, not in terms of the blade stock. The blade stock, sorry, this little wheel here, it causes me some trouble, and we'll talk about that. The blade stock thickness is actually identical. It's nearly 1/4 inch. I'll measure it here in a second. It's only thinner in the scales, right? So still a very, very thick knife. Let's do carry profile. So thickness of the Mini Beowulf up against the Para 3, it is still monstrously thick. Absolutely, especially for such a small knife. How about length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3? You can see here it is definitely shorter this way than both, but it is substantially taller. Usually I set it on top of the Para 3, but it's going to cover it completely. This is a tall knife, and it's a thick knife. Even though it is small, you're going to notice it, unless you've been carrying around knives like the Cold Steel Formax as an EDC, which I know people do, right? If you've been, obviously, this goes without saying, or it should anyway, if you've been carrying larger, thicker knives, it might not seem like that big of a deal. For most people who are carrying knives like this, right? This is one of the most common EDC knives in existence. Well, then yeah, it's going to feel like quite a difference, a pretty massive contrast, right? This is something you're going to have to adapt to and commit to if you really want to, carry it. Let's do weight. I'm going to let you guys take a look at the inside of this. There is no milling whatsoever on the inside of this titanium. They just went for it. They were like, whatever, we don't care if it's heavy. And it is. Not nearly as heavy as its older brother, but for a knife with a, 2.75-inch blade, it weighs 7 ounces. So it's a lot, right? This is heavy. The balance, funny enough, it's actually all right. It's actually a little bit blade heavy. I would say balance is actually almost right on the pivot, which is impressive. I mean, this knife has a super unique shape. There are not very many knives out there that look just like this. I've seen some fixed blades and things like that are a little bit similar where they do this deep finger choil in here, right? But it has a super unique shape for a folding knife. And I find it interesting that it is balanced so close to the pivot, right? So it really, once you've got it locked in, it's not really that heavy. You're still aware that you're holding a big bricky object, right? Folding pry bar, folding hammer, right? Whatever, the same stuff people always say. But you're aware of that. But the weight, that idea of 7 ounces goes out the window a little bit when it's in the hand. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is a T8, and then for whatever reason, the pocket clip screws are also T8, but the body screws are T6, which is just a very odd choice. On the bigger guy, everything is T8. I really feel like these knives, since everything else is so ridiculous, I think oversized fasteners would have really been a better choice. I mean, do something wild like a T15, at least a T10 for the pivot, and then at least T8 for the body screws. There's a few extra. This knife is going to be a little bit more of a pain to take apart than like a knife with minimal hardware and a knife with larger fasteners, but it's still doable, and it is still a simple pillar construction. I'm sorry, not pillar, sandwich construction knife with 2 pieces of titanium and a very large backspacer. Considering the backspacer is so big, it's funny that it's still balanced by the pivot. But yeah, it won't be that big of a deal. So make sure you have good tools and a place to put your hardware, and you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and if I can locate my calipers, there they are. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness. I believe it is very, very close to 1/4 inch. Blade stock thickness is coming in at 235 thousandths. Very close to a 1/4 inch in the stock. All right. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes here. I like the look of this, right? I am somebody, if you don't know, I am somebody who likes, in a novelty sense, silly, overbuilt knives. Like knives that are so unbelievably thick. And this knife is not just, it's like, oh, it's thick, but is it as strong as the cold steel triathlon? All right, as soon as I say overbuilt, as soon as I say that something's tough, it's like, people can hear, even if they're doing something that has nothing to do with YouTube. It's like cold steel triadlock fans come out of the ductwork to stand up for the blood. Listen, I think the triadlock is massive overkill. I think most of the things that would require, most tasks that would require the strength of a triadlock would likely require a more optimal tool altogether, right? If you're in that territory, you're probably using the wrong tool. Same thing goes for this knife, right? It has these incredibly overbuilt elements that would allow it to stand up to quite a bit of abuse. And I'm not just talking about thick materials. I'm talking about the secondary lock right here, which does work. It will keep that little disc will actually keep that lock bar from moving over all the way. You have to actually go back counterclockwise. I'm sorry. You go clockwise to disengage it. Boy, it's stiff. I almost couldn't tell the difference. And then you go counterclockwise to lock it in place. But that's not it. It also has the secondary pin lock, which will allow you to lock the blade out again. So this creates 3 points of contact, which is the same idea behind the strength of the triad lock. It'll be about the same thing. I mean, every other part of the knife will fail before the lock disengages on this, right? But again, if you're putting yourself in a scenario where you require this much strength in your knife, sometimes this gets stuck, which is a little bit annoying. I kind of wish that this pin thing in general, just using a penny here to undo it, was knurled maybe on the outside. But as you can see, it's easy to get out of there. So yeah, it'll do all that, but great. I mean, when are you gonna need, what are you gonna be doing with it that requires that much? I mean, I don't know. It will cut. I'll demonstrate. You know, we get a lot of people on YouTube with knives like this, and they're just like, gosh, it's just so it's just so thick. I can't cut with it, right? And it's idiotic. You know, it doesn't make any sense. If you actually, you know, were to, you know, cut or approach paper like you normally would with a blade, you'd find out, yeah, it will slice. It's absolutely sharp enough to do that. The question is not whether or not it will cut. The question is how difficult or how convenient is it going to be to actually process a substantial amount of material with this thing, right? Because you are, I mean, in the case of, let's say, you know, breaking down a cardboard box, you're pushing the entire wedge through that cardboard, which is a lot of material, right? It is simply not going to cut as conveniently as, you know, something with a thinner blade. And most of the time, and I mean 99.999% of the time, that's really the most of what you can expect with your knife. Even if you are going to do tasks that require a more durable knife, right? If we're talking about your typical bushcraft knife, those are generally not insanely thick, right? I mean, there's definitely like super thick, you know, bushcraft knives, or ultra, like do-it-all kind of survival knives like the SE5, right? But it just seems silly to talk about this because this is, it's almost like this is built for something that is just not it's not a task that anybody's going to naturally come across. I honestly can't think of a specific task that this knife is specifically optimized for, right? And I also feel like that's obvious looking at this. Thinking about the design philosophy behind this, I think this obviously caters to people who just like overbuilt knives. I think the vast majority of people who buy overbuilt knives don't buy them because they're like, ah, yes, of course, my really insane lifestyle and occupation require an object of, you know, that is both compact in nature and durable beyond comprehension. No, I think most people buying these are just like, ooh, neat, thick knife, right? I mean, that's the reason I buy them. I think they're fun. I have a lot of knives in my collection that are, you know, ridiculous in a whole bunch of different ways, right? But one of those elements that's interesting to me is it's thick. Like that's all it has to be, right? We don't have to justify these things. You don't have to justify this if you want to carry it. You don't have to have a reason, right? You do not have to have a role in your life, right? You don't need to create a role for this thing. You can just like it. You can just, if you're like, hey, I like thick knives, right? That's it's freeing, right? Try it. Stop trying to create a specific tactical role for these. Stop trying to argue it into, you know, you can just enjoy it. That's the reason that I enjoy it. But if you so choose to carry and use this thing, those are, you know, that's what you're going to run into is, wow, it's freaking thick. It's going to be a little bit of a problem. You look at these knives and you think, those look super duper ergonomic because of the deep choil. It's an interesting grip, right? This guy, I got to say, you pick it up and initially what feels like, oh yeah, that's real locked in. Really, I realized what I was feeling there is it's just unique. The way that you're gripping this knife, the way that it curls all the way around your index finger, and there's so much material and it's such a monstrous blade that you're just instantly like, oh, wow, right? Which is very different than ergonomic comfort. The weirdest thing about these knives is these pocket clips follow exactly the back spine of the knife, and it feels very odd in your hand. So I believe that a lot of use, especially with this guy, because truthfully, I'm not getting a full 4-finger purchase on this. My pinky's falling off the end. Continuous use with something like this is going to wear your hand out so quickly. I mean, pretty much anything else is a better choice for just like general like processing material or even making a quick cut into a package, right? This is going to slow you down. It's going to be cumbersome. It's going to make all knife tasks less convenient versus almost anything else that you've been carrying. You're going to carry this because you want to, because you like it, right? It might slow you down half a second, but you will notice it. You will notice the inconvenience of this. The action on this thing is plenty smooth. By the way, I didn't mention this. These are still, a lot of people were confused about where these Midgards Messer knives are made. The fixed blades that they do, because this company's out of Germany. I think soon they'll be opening up a USA thing, a USA shop, but at least that's, like a place for them to distribute. But their fixed blades are made in-house in Germany. Their folding knives are made in China. And this is information that they freely give, right? They've never tried to hide it or anything like that. These are manufactured in China. And they feel that way, right? I mean, it feels like something that is precision manufactured in China. The fit and finish is very, very good. People who are sticklers about, hardware seating and just like the symmetry of the blade and wanting the final cutting bevel to be even and everything to be nice and pretty and proper, right? It's all there, right? This is very clearly precision machined, and it's nice. I really love the diamond texturing on the titanium. I think that's nice. I don't know why they all of a sudden are doing this like sort of blue jeans, like matte blue ano. It's fine though, it looks nice. Maybe they'll keep releasing different versions of these knives with various ano or texture patterns. I think that would be a good idea. But everything looks really, really good. You can choke up on this blade, and the choke up position is a little awkward because your index finger is it's on such a different level. It's like on the second or third floor versus the main floor where the middle finger locks in. So it's a little bit of an awkward ergonomic experience. I think maybe the best one, the one that feels the most natural and most comfortable, is this one right here. But again, you're really just going to be enjoying that unnatural or unorthodox hand position on a knife. I can't say that it is massively comfortable, but it's also not bad. I want to emphasize that. It doesn't feel like I couldn't use this, or after one cut, I'm going to be like, owie, not like that. It's just going to be, it's different than something like this, which is just, there you go. It's like made to grip naturally, right? The edges are chamfered down, but some areas are unnecessarily sharp, like the lock bar, which is a bother because the tension on that lock bar is ridiculous. The relief cut is very small. So that lock bar tension is absolutely crazy. And just a couple times opening this and disengaging it, it's going to bother your thumb a little bit, right? The action's nice, and the blade, with a little bit of encouragement, will fall into the closed position. I think more so due to just the mass of the blade, but it does. This can also, it's not really a knife that you can do it, you can flick it open, but I believe, as many of my viewers have pointed out, the reason that they don't add thumb studs or a flipper tab is because a lot of, if not most places in Europe, do not allow knives that are locking and can be opened with one hand, even though these obviously can be, right? I think the idea here is that it doesn't have an obvious one-hand mechanism, right? So these somehow make them legal. I don't know. Don't get legal advice from me. Check your local area. If you live in the United States, most places this is going to be just fine, right? This is just going to be a weird pocket knife. The tumbled finish on the blade is beautiful. The way that this is done is exactly how I like to see this. So I'm just getting fingerprints off of it. We have like kind of a medium polish and then a light, I call it grain structure. It's like the scratch structure is really like little tiny scratches that are very even. Looks great. The fuller looks great. This is, I guess I'm going to call this a drop point with an enormous flat. This is CPM D2 steel. CPM D2 is not ingot D2, right? Ingot D2 is just what, like I'm saying there, it's ingot formed. CPM D2 is made by Crucible and is powder formed. That is a US made composition. Whether or not ingot form D2 is made by CPM, or in some cases D2, the D2 composition is, my guess is there's a Chinese version of it, right? This is confusing because it's like when people say, they're like, oh, this Chinese knife has M390. It must be Chinese M390. False, right? M390 is bowler, period. That means when you're paying for a super high-end, at least, from a company who's well-established, like let's say We Knives or Bestech, when they use M390, that's bowler. They got it from bowler. You're buying some questionable thing on Alibaba that's sporting M390 on the blade from a company you've never heard of, there's a good chance that that's just nothing. It's just them writing M390 or laser etching M390 on the blade, right? When it comes to D2, ingot form D2, I believe, I could be mistaken, I believe that Crucible makes their own ingot form D2 and powder form D2. But I also believe that some, D2, I think it's possible that some of that is being manufactured in China. This, factually though, the D2 that's being used on here is CPM D2, and it is made by Crucible. This is not the same D2 that you will find in budget knives. When you look at a $50 knife from QSP or Kubi or, Sencut or Civivi or whoever, right? And you see D2, it is not the same stuff. You're not going to see CPM D2 on a $50 knife. Generally speaking, CPM D2 is on knives that range from $100 to $200. I don't think it's a bad steel. I don't think that the benefits, it does, the CPM process makes the carbide formation in the edge more uniform, and so you get better performance out of CPM D2 versus the ingot D2. So there is a benefit to the CPM process, and CPM D2 is 100%, it is better than regular D2. Is it a lot better? Depends on the report you read. Some people claim it's marginally better, and some people claim it's like a miracle steel versus ingot form D2. So it depends, right? It's like we have 154 CM, which is ingot formed, and then we have CPM 154, which is the premium version of it, and it's not a whole lot different because it doesn't rely heavily on carbide formation. I'm not a metallurgist. I'm just somebody who reads a lot. You can find this information on Google very easily, right? But commenting on the steel, I don't think CPM D2, I don't mind CPM D2. I just think that this should be something else. This should be at least S30. It should be something stainless. It should still be a CPM steel. Something in this price range to be something premium, but I would like to see something stainless that still has good edge retention properties. S35VN, S45VN, right? I think M390 is kind of a ridiculous choice for this geometry, but then again, what blade steel is not a ridiculous choice for this, did I say composition, this geometry, right? I think S35VN, S45VN might be a better choice, but most compositions are just going to be silly. So in that sense, the steel might not matter to some people, but I feel like the people who are going to spend money on this would prefer that it is something that we are more comfortable seeing at this price point, right? So yeah, there you go. Do with that information what you will. In any case, no matter what this blade is made out of, the one thing that that is certain is that the blade itself is extremely durable. It is very unlikely that you will be doing anything that you would naturally do with a knife and break this tip. Anybody who says, I owned a mini Beowulf or something similar and I broke the tip, the first thing that's going to come into my mind is you were doing something beyond stupid with your knife. It was not made to do whatever it was that you were doing. In fact, I would lean on the side of you were trying to break the knife and you probably failed multiple times and then finally broke it, right? So it's overkill. The geometry is ridiculous. Look at this. Look at the tip. It's insane, right? It will stand up to the abuse and the lock will take it too, especially if you have this thing, turned all the way down and you've got the secondary pin lock in there. Yeah, it's going to do that. But, then if you find yourself in that position, once again, you should be using a fixed blade or probably a different tool, right? You might need a hatchet or a hammer or an actual pry bar, right? So yeah, there you go. I don't know that there's a whole lot more I can say about the blade. I do like that it has this mat. It must have needed a full body backspacer because, even with that, the balance is still right behind the pivot. So had they not put the backspacer and only put it halfway, it would be even more blade heavy. Maybe it would be balanced right on the pivot. I don't know. My guess is the reason that is full body is because it's so thick that you could easily push your finger in there and accidentally touch the edge, which is sharp enough to cut you. So this is probably a safety thing. It's the same way with the big one, right? Full body length. So yeah, and it also looks cool. Goes with the theme. There is a glass breaker. I don't know that you necessarily have to smash the glass with this particular part. Honestly, you could probably just take any part of this knife and bash it into the glass and it's going to shatter, right? There's plenty of other points, but you know what? That point will probably do it. That's a pretty, it's a pyramid of metal. It will definitely, it will definitely shatter glass. This pocket clip is, very well mounted to the frame. I mean, it's just a couple of screws, but it's neat how, like, the pocket clip itself is also, like, ridiculously overbuilt, and it's textured. So in and out, I mean, truthfully, in and out of the pocket, I'm just wearing, let me get my knife out of my pants there. In and out of the pocket, it's pretty easy. This is very pinchy on the way back out because it's got this vertical shelf, and that's real grabby, right? So this, you could say, it locks it into your pocket. Really what it does is as you're pulling out, it gets stuck, so then your hands slip off of it, but you still have enough force to pull it out, so it ends up just flying through the air and bouncing all over the ground, right? I wish that this would be a less aggressive shelf. This ramp here is just fine. It's also way too long. Like, this thing is 66% or so of the body length. You probably could have cut it off, like, back here. Not saying, that wouldn't have necessarily helped the ergonomic situation, which is already awkward, but I think it would have. I mean, this is just huge. And what's funny is it's not like they put the same clip on as the Beowulf, the full-size one. This is a totally different, like, this is a clip that's made for the full-size Beowulf, and it's also massively oversized. I'm not sure why those are so big, but it does go along with the theme of the knife. Again, I'm critiquing things here where it's like, I feel like the gentleman who designed this was like, yeah, whatever. The whole thing was designed to be kind of ridiculous and over the top, right? So the pocket clip is just going along with that theme. So in that sense, yeah, it does, right? I am definitely a knife design reviewer, so that's something that I can say, hey, that is something that some people are going to enjoy. Some people are going to say, I don't care if the pocket clip is super duper functional. I just want to know that it goes along with the design of the knife and isn't an afterthought. There's a lanyard hole. Yay. You might actually need a lanyard for this. That might actually help, which is something that I don't often say. This does have a steel lock bar insert right there that doubles as the over travel stop, right? And then this disc also acts as an over travel and lock bar stabilizer, which is different. That keeps the thing from moving, over traveling this way and this way. It's kind of like what the Hinderer thing does. There is absolutely no blade play whatsoever. It's probably obvious. There is no lock stick, surprisingly. There is no pivot lash. It's relatively tight but consistent action, and it's a nice detent. Feels more like a thud than anything else, but it is a strong detent. This isn't a knife that I feel like I could shake out. It's not wanting to. The blade looks slightly off center. I wonder if mine's like that too. This one is is it? Is it my eyes? I think it maybe is ever so slightly, not much. This could probably be adjusted with the pivot. It's ever so slightly. I think it needs to go slightly this way, right? Usually something like that is just a minor adjustment with the pivot, but I do like to see these things centered from the factory. All right, this is going to end the way that you would assume. These knives are massively overbuilt, and they are massively overbuilt on purpose to, appeal to people who like the novelty overbuiltness of knives, and there is nothing wrong with that. There's going to be plenty of people who, for some reason, are this just upsets them, right? How dare, how dare this knife exist, even though I'm not being forced to buy it? Remember that. You're not forced to buy this. This exists specifically for people who are interested in these types of knives. No matter, how fussy or how grumpy it makes you, there is a healthy market for stuff like this, and there are collectors who enjoy this stuff. These are limited run. I don't know if they'll do 250 or 300, right? But they are limited run, and that makes sense to me. I mean, this is not I mean, they'll probably make more, but they'll probably just change the color or the texture pattern or do something different, evolve it in some small way. If you are into super duper overbuilt knives, but something like this is just too big for you, then maybe this will be more your style. For literally everybody else, right? Because these are also very expensive. For literally everybody else, this is obviously not a knife I can recommend, right? This is for people who like overbuilt knives and who appreciate the elements that come with some of these more expensive knives, right? This is a lot of money. I'm not 100% certain that the 350 euros, or even if it came out, let's say they decided to drop this at 300 euros. I don't feel like that it makes me feel super great. I would feel a lot better about it if it was utilizing a different steel, S35VN or especially S45VN, which I think would be better. So I don't know. If you love it, it's there. You can buy it. Not recommendable for most people. And they gave this to me, right? This is mine to keep. So if you've ever wanted an example of a video where I specifically say I do not recommend this knife and I got it for free, here you go. This is one of those, right? It's cool, it's neat, and I love it. I'm glad, I'm really happy. I actually really enjoy this knife, and it's gonna stay in my permanent collection because I think it's fun, right? But it's not a knife that I would recommend to most people, right? It's just, it's in a very, very specific category that's only gonna cater, or only gonna be even interesting to certain types of people. So, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed today. This was a long one. Thanks again to Midgards Messer and Tools for Gents for sending this in for me to take a look at. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.